Hello everyone, in this video we are going to see an interesting Azure use case. The use case is we have a set of files in storage account. The objective is to copy these files to Azure SQL Database. But the tricky part is that we are not going to directly copy these files to Azure SQL Database. We have a lookup table which contains the file name and the table name. For each file name, we are going to get the corresponding table name and create the table in Azure SQL Database. And we are also going to copy the data from the corresponding CSV files. I hope the use case is clear. Now let's get into the implementation. Here is our Azure homepage. The first step is to upload the source file to the storage account container. In this tutorials, I am going to upload the source file to Azure Tutorials storage account. Let me get into the storage account and click containers. We have a container called tutorial files. Inside this container, I am going to upload the source files. Let me click upload. We have two files, names.csv and cars.csv. Let me upload both the files. Both the files are successfully uploaded. Let's see the data. Inside the cars.csv, let's view the data. We have different car company and the car models. And inside the names.csv, let me view the data. We have the username, identifier, first name and last name of different employees. We are going to load the data from these two files to the Azure SQL Database. As a next step, let's see the lookup table. Let me go to the home page and log into my SQL database. Let me preview the data. Let me query my lookup table. We have two columns, file name and the table name. The file name column contains the list of file names and the corresponding table names on which we are going to load the data. Let's implement that using our pipeline. The first step of creating the pipeline is to create a linked service for the storage account container. Let's implement that. Let me go to Synapse Analytics and go to Managed and create a new linked service. My source files are in blob storage. Let me click Azure Blob Storage. I'm going to name my linked service as LS Source Demo. LS Source Demo. Let me select the subscription and the storage account name, Azure Tutorials. Let me check my connection. The connection is successful. Now let me create the linked service. The linked service is successfully created. The next step is to create the pipeline and use get metadata activity in order to read the source files. In order to create the pipeline, let me click integrate and create a new pipeline. Let me name my pipeline as PL Demo. PL Demo. Now I'm going to use get metadata activity to read the source files. Let me select the get metadata activity. In the get metadata activity settings, I'm going to create a new data set to read the source files. Let me click New. My source files are in Azure Blob Storage and click Continue. They are CSV files and click Continue. Let me name my data set as DS Source Demo. DS Source Demo and select the linked service that we created. And here I am going to select the path of the container. It is in tutorial files. And here are our source files. Let me click OK and click OK again. In the file list, inside arguments, I am going to select the child items to read the file names. Let me run my pipeline and I'll show you why I selected the child items. Let me click debug. My pipeline is running. If you see the output of the get metadata activity, inside the child items, we have the list of file names. The actual file names are under child items, which is in a list, and inside that we have two keys, name and type. The name has the actual file name. As a next step, let's iterate over each of the files and get the corresponding table name. In order to iterate over each of the file names, we are going to use for each activity. For each activity, I'm going to connect the get metadata activity to the for each activity. And in the for each activity settings, I'm going to select in the items, I'm going to select the child items. Get metadata activity child items. Let me click OK. The input of for each activity is get metadata activity, and inside that we are going to read the child items. Let me click OK. The next step is to create a linked service for the Azure SQL Database in order to reference the lookup table. Let's do that. Let me go to Manage and create a new linked service. This time we are reading the data from SQL Database, Azure SQL Database. Let me select SQL Database. Let me name my linked service as LSDB Demo. LSDB Demo and select my Azure subscription and the SQL server name. Let me select my database and provide my password. Let me test my connection. The connection is successful. Now let me create the linked service. The linked service is successfully created. The next step is to import the lookup activity in our pipeline in order to reference the lookup table. For that, let me click Integrate. And here is our pipeline. Inside the for each activity, I am going to import the lookup activity. Lookup. And inside the settings, let me create a new data set. Our source is Azure SQL Database. Let me select Azure SQL Database. Let me name my data set as DS Source DB Demo. Now let me select the linked service that we created, LSDB Demo. Our table name is Lookup Table. Now let me click OK. And inside the use query, I'm going to use the query to select the lookup table. Let me do that. Inside the pipeline expression, I'm going to use this query. I have selected the table name from the lookup table where the file name from the for each activity. Inside the for each activity, we saw that the key is the name. So we are using items.name. Let me click OK. I hope I selected all the settings. Let me run the pipeline till this point. Before that, let me validate if there is any issues. The pipeline is validated successfully. Let me close this. Now let me run the pipeline. The pipeline is running. If you see here, the lookup activity is called 2 times because we have 2 source files. Let me refresh. If you see the output of the lookup activity, we got the corresponding table name. And in the input of the lookup activity, we see that the query is successfully passed to the lookup activity and the query got executed and we got the corresponding table name. The next step is to import the copy data activity in our pipeline to copy the files from storage account to the Azure SQL Database. Let's do that. Let me import the copy data activity. Copy data activity. I'm going to connect the output of the lookup activity to the copy data activity. And inside the copy data activity source settings, I'm going to create a new data set specifically for the copy data activity. Let me click New. My source data is in Azure Blob Storage and click OK. They are CSV files. Let me click Continue and name my data set as DES source copy demo. Now let me select the linked service ls source demo and select the container. The container is tutorial files. Inside that we have the files. Let me click OK. And inside the data set we have to mention the file name. For that I'm going to the data set. Here is our data set. The file name should come from the for each activity names key that we saw. For that I'm going to parameterize and create a new parameter called file name. Let me click connect and in the file name I'm going to select the file name. Now let me go to the pipeline. Our pipeline is PL demo. Inside the source settings, I'm going to mention the value for the file name is coming from for each activity dot name key. Now let me click OK. Now let me specify the sync setting. Let me click sync and create a new data set specifically for the copy data activity. Let me click new. Our target is SQL Database. SQL Database and click continue. Let me specify my data set as DS target copy demo. Let me select the linked service, LSDB demo. We don't have the table names created yet, so I'm going to enter manually. Schema is DBO. We will specify the name of the tables later. We don't have anything to import because the table is not created yet. So I am selecting none. Let me click OK. Let me go to the data set. For that I am clicking data. Here is our data set. I am going to parameterize this data set in order to get the table name from the lookup activity. Using the lookup activity, we are referencing the lookup table and get the corresponding table name. For that, I am going to create a new parameter and mention it as table name. Let me click connection and mention the table name. Now let me go to the pipeline. In the table name values, let me click add dynamic and click our activity outputs and scroll down. The table name should come from lookup activity and our column name is table name. Let me click OK. Our pipeline is almost created, and one important thing is that the table should be automatically created during the pipeline execution. So I'm going to check the auto table create. That's pretty much it. Let me publish all my changes. Click publish. The pipeline is successfully published. Let me validate my pipeline to see if there are any issues. The pipeline is validated successfully. Now let me run the pipeline. We have the lookup activity and the copy activity called 2 times because we have 2 different files. Let me click refresh. Both the copy activity is completed successfully. Let me click refresh. All the activities completed successfully. Now let me go to the Azure SQL Database and click refresh. We have the tables successfully created. Now let me query the table to see the data. The data is also successfully copied. The next table is employee names. All the employee names are successfully copied and the table name is coming from the lookup table. Let me check the lookup table again. Our table name is matching with the lookup table name. I hope you like this use case and I'm sure that you learned something new today. If you do like this video, please consider to subscribe and I will see you in yet another interesting Azure use case. Thank you.